This is a Media Lab podcast.
Kyle,
Whoa, Dave, why are you so out of breath?
I brought it. I got it just in time.
You brought what? What's in your bag that you have here?
I got it's 100,000 Deutschmarks. 100,000 of them.
Where did you get Deutschmarks? Those don't even exist anymore.
I thought we needed it for the machine. You texted me.
Dave, these are Bitcoin tokens.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And my name is David.
And I'm the machine.
A podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. Today, we're going to be watching the film Run, Lola, Run.
Manni?
Hilf mir, Lola. Ich weiß nicht, was ich machen soll.
Was ist passiert? Wie viel war's denn? In der Tasche, meine ich.
100.000.
Was? Die Tasche.
Tasche.
Die Tasche.
Tasche.
Die Tasche.
Tasche.
Die Tasche. Die Tasche. Die Tasche. Die Tasche.
Hier stehst du da von wegen Liebe kann alles, aber nicht in 20 Minuten 100.000 Mark erzaubern.
Dann helfe ich dir, mir fällt immer was ein.
Mann, Lola, wach auf, in 20 Minuten bin ich entweder tot oder ich geh jetzt nach Hause, hol mir das Geld.
I guess I should have put on my best German accent, and I think it's Lola Run.
Lola
I don't know
Run.
how to... Lola Run.
Lola
That sounds
Run.
more Scottish that you just did there,
Lola
but
Run.
okay. Dave, what is your history with this film?
This was definitely one of my favorite movies after I discovered it. I did own it on likely digital video disc. I do not have the said copy anymore, so I don't know what happened to that. And I'm pretty sure I can safely say that at least in the first 5 or 6 years of owning that digital video disc, I watched this movie often, but I cannot comfortably say that I remember much of it now.
I don't want to belabor this point, but I do like to constantly bring it up that I am younger than you are. So this movie would have come out when you were what, in your mid-20s? Not
No.
mid-20s, but young 20s.
Yeah.
So were you in university, out of university when this came out?
Well, I dropped out. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
of university age, you prick.
I was around the university, Kyle, okay?
Thanks for bringing that up. Hashtag not bitter, as the kids say these days. I hashtagged it. I would have been 21. I would have been 21
Okay.
solar years old in the solar calendar.
Well, I only bring this up because while this movie came out when I was technically in high school, I did not watch this movie until I was in university, and this became very much like, I don't know, part of the canon of university life. I watched this a bunch of times. It was like this movie, weirdly, Reservoir Dogs.
It's a great movie.
And then
The
there's
year.
another one that I'm totally blanking on. Anyways, like the big common like university movies where you get the poster and put it up on your wall, that sort of thing. Like this was one of those films. So I probably watched this at least 8 or 9 times throughout the like 3.5 years ish that I was there. And then I know I've seen it at least one time since then, but probably not in the last decade. I'm going to guess probably not in the last decade.
If people saw us on the street, they would not realize how similar we were, Kyle. The premise of this podcast was supposed to be that we don't do anything the same. If we keep doing this, I'm going to start
we
sounding
have
like
often,
it.
when we're at a coffee shop, we're often confused for brothers. And I know that there's a bit of a similarity there, but
I think it's the clothing. You know, we dress very similar. You know,
yeah,
I like
right.
I like to wear shirts
With the cap.
and you also wear shirts when we meet. So
Often I wear shoes. And here's my question, though, and I kind of know the answer. this was obviously not your first, like, quote unquote, non-English film or foreign film. No. But was this like one of your first, like, German films that you had watched?
That's very specific. Sure. I mean, I couldn't name you a German film.
The only other one I actually can think of off the top of my head is In the Lives of Others, which is a great little film.
Speaking
thriller.
of which, check out our Patreon page. It's mentioned.
There we go. We'll get to that, Dave.
Das Boot, maybe?
Oh, Das Boot. Yeah, that'd probably be the other one. But I can actually recall the very first. There was two non-English films that I watched as I was getting into film. One was Life is Beautiful, the Italian film with
Roberto Benigni. Yeah, that was my Italian accent. Oh, probably
I actually
some shade
went to the theater. This is how much of a nerd I was. Went to the theater to watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, but that's everybody.
In grade 12.
I did. I was angry. I left angry.
Yeah, I know you don't like Chow Yun-fat and like Ancient China.
No, I love Chow Yun-fat, but he shouldn't have made a floating balletic martial arts movie. He's better than that.
Hey, it is a beautiful film, and I cried.
Yeah,
so
anally. Yeah, and I think there's a cultural and whatever you want to call it, both my being not white, I don't know if you can tell that over the podcast audio, and as well being in Toronto where said international films were more available. Not necessarily, they weren't, in a Blockbuster or a Jumbo Video, but there were ways, right. Kyle, if you knew all about the different markets, you could get hands.
Yeah, I really did not get into that a lot until into university. My parents are one of those people who have straight up said, like, we don't want to read a movie and we're not going to get a movie that we have to read subtitles, which is like, whatever, fine. But I just happen to like those types of things every so often as I go through Akira Kurosawa, although it's been like 6 weeks since the last time I watched one.
This is why I read gooder than you.
All right, Dave, why don't we do this? It's going to be fun to kind of get back into this and see if this holds up after a bunch of years having not seen it. So I'll go thank some sponsors, and then when we return, we'll be talking about Run, Lola, Run.
Hi, everyone. Just Kyle here again to thank some of the people that make this show continue to go. I just was watching Run, Lola, Run, and it made me feel like short of breath. And then I just realized it's not the movie. It's just I'm extremely, extremely out of shape. But that's beside the point. Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is brought to you by World on Fire, a new podcast from CBC Edmonton. World on Fire is a new 5-part series that takes you to the front lines of out-of-control wildfires in Canada, Australia, and California. Recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic, hosts Adrian Lamb and Mike Flanagan look at what it takes to find hope in the midst of fear and destruction and how communities affected by wildfires rebuild. The series examines the high costs that wildfires cause to people's health, homes, and communities. Find World on Fire on the CBC Listen app or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find it online at cbc.ca/worldonfire. This week, we're also brought to you by ATB. And today I want to talk to you about ATB's new podcast, The Future Of. Join Todd Hirsch, ATB's Vice President and Chief Economist, as he connects with special guests who offer unique and useful perspectives about the future. Explore how our economy and communities can not only brace for change, but embrace the opportunity it creates. From the future of women in business to the changing nature of work itself, The Future Of helps us understand what's coming and what we need to do today to get the tomorrow we want. Featuring 2 episodes each month, plus bonus episodes, The Future Of includes interviews with top community and business leaders from Alberta and around the world. Subscribe to The Future Of in the Apple Store, Google Play, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts are found, and connect to ask your questions about the future by emailing thefutureof@atb.com.
Here's what's hilarious, Dave, is that even though I just told you a mere hour and 20 minutes ago that I watched this a bunch of times in university, it was like I was watching this like, I don't know if I remember this part, but then I knew what was coming up. It was like this weird juxtaposition of like, I don't really remember this, and then kind of remembering it at the same time.
Yes, I felt that exactly. I walked into the couch we were sitting on together in front of the screen, thinking that I remembered how this movie was going to go. And then as the first sequence started, I started, I was like making a face because like, I remember the skeleton of it, but I don't remember enough.
The weird thing about it is that for some reason, I thought the movie was about the same story from 3 different perspectives. And that's really not what it is. It's the same story told 3 times, but from her getting down the stairs at quicker or faster, slower or faster. So anyways, we'll get into all of that here in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that it wasn't really the same story. Was it, Kyle?
Was it?
Ooh.
Was it? Let me push this button here, see what the machine wants us to talk about. So Run, Lola Run was released in Germany on August 28th, 1998, but was released in North America on June 18th, 1999.
Sweet.
So we would not have been able to see it unless we flew to Germany until June 18th of 1999. The other major release that week was The General's Daughter, written by Simon West, directed by Christopher Bertolini, starring John Travolta, Madeleine Stowe, and James Cromwell.
All I kept thinking was Saturday Night Fever. I've never seen it.
That's why.
But I knew Travolta was in it.
There's a tickle of the brain.
Is 99 already, he's lost his reputation? Is he already a public Scientologist?
No. Oh, well, he was a Scientologist for years before that. But I mean, he would have had his career resurgence from
Face Off.
Pulp Fiction. Face Off would have happened.
Yep.
Face Off would have happened. And then this is him trying to come back again.
Take his face off.
My unpopular opinion is that you have somebody like Nicolas Cage, right? Polarizing, but in my opinion, still makes like one like pretty solid film for like every 4 films he's in. John Travolta is in like one good film for every 25 movies he's in my opinion. Like it takes a while from like, okay, fine, finally a good performance again. By the way, sympathy to him because his wife just passed away, so I don't want to rag on him too much. Run, Lola Run is currently rated 7.6 on IMDb, 77 on Metacritic, and if you go over to Rotten Tomatoes, based on 82 critics, it is at 93%. Based on 144,147 users, it's at 90%. So pretty close, up in the 90s for both of them. It is available on DVD or Blu-ray. You can buy or rent it on iTunes. You can also rent it on Google Play or YouTube. And in Canada, you can stream it for free on the CTV app. You just have to watch commercials every 20 minutes. Not that I would know, but hey, you could do that if you wanted to.
Thanks for letting me in on that before I presumably paid for. I don't mind paying money for this one. So yeah, let's move on.
Its budget was, in American dollars, $1.75 million. It opened to $123,000, but would go on to make $7 million worldwide. No breakdown domestically and internationally, apparently. And so that brings it up to $11.2 million due to inflation. So this was a pretty big hit for these German filmmakers.
Isn't it funny how it's so relative as a percentage? Because that wouldn't even scratch the surface in America.
Oh, no. But then how many movies are you going to make for like under $2 million?
Probably
in America.
Probably the ones that should be made, Kyle.
True enough. I mean, have we talked about it yet? Yes, we've talked about Runaway Bride already.
Oh, fuck.
So, I mean, when you make that movie for $60 million, you're like, why? Why is this costing $60 million to make? Anyways, so its plot description from IMDb is, after a botched money delivery, Lola has 20 minutes to come up with 100,000 Deutschmarks.
That's how much I cost.
It stars Franka Potente as Lola, Moritz Bleibtreu as Manny, and Herbert Knope as Vater, or Lola's dad. As we mentioned last week, and I don't think we really got into a great description of it, we do have a Patreon, so you could actually go and donate money to the cause. As Dave just mentioned, it does cost money to rent a lot of these films to see, so it helps defray the costs of keeping up with all of these movies the machine forces us to watch. It used to have it so that it was like a little... how did you describe it before we started recording, Dave? A viewing receptacle to watch films from its chest. But now we have to do it out of our own pocket.
Yeah.
Maybe call them screens. But there's some cool things over there. One of the cool things is that Dave now writes up a little kind of a blog post about the actors that are in this movie. that you can go and read. And it's free for the first week and then goes behind the paywall afterwards. So definitely anyone can go and enjoy what he's written over there. And if you want to keep up with everything that we're talking about, you can help us along over there. More info on that over the next few weeks. Any big things that you wanted to bring up from your research?
No, I mean, we could talk about culture bias because there's not a lot of information on German actors on American Wikipedia.
Odd.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like, it's like if you had asked me theoretically about whether I'd seen German films prior to this one, and I was unable to.
Here's the thing, and I know 1,000% you don't want me to talk about this, but I'm going to anyways. But definitely in university, when you see this movie, for me at least, you have the two lead actors, Lola and Manny. And as a closeted bisexual at the time, boy, was this a great movie for me to watch, because it was like the entire movie was just like eye candy for me to kind of like view. And this movie basically reveals kinks and stuff that you never knew would have been a thing for a small town Albertan boy. But that's as much as I need to go into from that.
Yeah, then we'll talk a little bit about let's call it the cultural sensitivities of Europe versus the prudish, puritanical North American world. But I do remember distinctly, I don't really celebrity crush too much. So the phrase would be like, I fell in love with, but Franca Portente is awesome.
Yeah, she's great.
But those little, lovebird sequences, very reminiscent of French films, kind of like a Luc Besson, with the colors.
Basically, all they need to be doing is smoking cigarettes
and having existential conversations. Kid ones, right? Like university level,
Yeah,
what if?
Exactly.
We're so wise now, Kyle. We would never get into that kind of. Those moments were great, and I loved how they slowed down some of the pace.
I think too. I think maybe that is part of it. Is like Franca Potente I kind of kept up with because she was in
the Bourne movies.
Bourne movies. Thank you. Yeah. She was in the Bourne movies, and so there was other stuff that I eventually saw her in. I don't know if I've seen the other actors in anything else. Potentially, I might have, but I just don't remember them.
You'd have to watch a lot of German media because that's the credits that I found.
Well, the last thing I'll say: this was written and directed by Tom Tykwer, who was born May 23rd, 1965. This is very much in the beginning of his career. He had made some shorts and a couple other movies. The only one I will mention is because I've been practicing how to say this. The other movie he made was Winterschlafe. I don't know what that translates to, but it's fun to say, isn't it? He is this weird, interesting figure. I am a kind of a big fan of Tom Tykwer because he's this quadruple threat. He's a writer, director, producer, and he composes for a lot of his films as well. So he kind of does all four of those things. I would say that for people listening to this, probably the two things that you're most likely, as far as movies go, Cloud Atlas, and then the Tom Hanks film, A Hologram for the King. Those are the two maybe that you have checked out. Cloud Atlas, he co-directed with the Wachowskis, but he was definitely involved with it. And then jumped on to helping them with Sense8, where he directed some of the episodes, as well as scored the entire series, as far as I know. And then for the last 3 years, he's been doing the German TV show Babylon Berlin, which again, he has written, directed, and composed the music, I think, for every episode. But all of those seasons are up on Netflix if you want to watch Babylon Berlin.
Oh, that Babylon Berlin is on Netflix.
It is on Netflix, yeah.
Probably will not watch it, but
I feel like there's a lot of German content because there's that show Dark as well that is getting rave reviews that is also from Germany, and it's basically adult Stranger Things is what it is what I've been told.
My friend told me I have to watch it, but I look at the picture and it looks dark. I don't know if I can watch it.
Well, my friends too, and I told them, it's like, I'm at this age right now where the last thing that I want to do before going to bed is be in an existential crisis. And it's like, I just don't want to do it.
We're already in an apocalypse. Like, I don't need more. I don't need
more of it.
Yeah.
Let me have fun. Let me watch my fun stuff, right? And then I'll...
Tickle me, right? Elmo. No. Let's move on.
Don't ever speak again. It makes you less pretty.
All right, so Dave, let's jump into it then. After having taken a break from watching this film, what stood out to you from watching it now as a plus 40 man?
Fuck you, Kyle. No, as I mentioned the word frenetic, it took me a little while to get into the animation. Like, I know it's super low budget and everything. It flows better with how the things piece together by the end, but the first cutscene, like the intro, I don't understand the goth clock Like there's just a lot of sort of tonal things that are happening that it was hard to figure out where I was. I think I would have liked the music more in 99 because I was really into the electronic music world. But it
is interesting how kind of dated it sounds.
It feels
like
a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I offended a neighbor here because I made the assumption that all Calgarians only listen to country music.
Right.
And apparently Calgary is like the EDM capital of Canada. And like,
is that true? I had no idea.
I don't know. And I'm like, I don't even know there's clubs here. Not that I go to them anymore, but apparently there's a big EDM culture in Calgary. And I thought that doesn't make any sense because everybody drives pickup trucks. Who's the racist now?
Now I want to hear like country EDM mashups.
I guarantee that exists. I mean, if Little Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus can hit a hit
That's
song.
true.
Yeah, so there was that. And then, you know what's good about this film is that even knowing that it was going to break apart and retell the story, I thought it was still exciting and interesting every time those intersections happen. There's a couple of weird visual things that, I mean, I love the Polaroid idea, but when they would change suddenly into like a handycam versus a film thing, I don't know if that was budgetary because it didn't feel like there was a reason why they would break apart like that. But
when you say handycam, what do you mean?
Well, they would have presumably a film camera to do all the standard shots. And then, for example, the one that stands out, like when the father and his mistress are having interchange, that's done on like a camcorder. I agree.
Like it is very apparent that was filmed on some sort of like
a little
low rent mini DV camera.
Right.
It's like, it's kind of pixelated. It's not, I don't know what the reasoning was behind that.
I've been doing a little background research about how, what's your fanboy guy's name? Tyrion?
Tom Tickfer.
Tom. Apparently he didn't get into film school and, kind of pulled himself up by the bootstraps and was given the advice to just shoot everything around him. So you get that sort of student film energy in this movie, but it is weird. It almost comes off like they shot B-roll to fill in the plot afterwards, except that it can't have been the case. For example, like the father and the mistress is such a crucial piece of information throughout, all timelines. So there's some intent with that, which is weird. And then, having the romantic things done almost in a monochromatic, red light.
Right.
There's some jarring things with the energy of the whole. I know it's called Run, Lola, Run, but my God, it felt like I was sweating, which is not a bad thing, but it's,
I'm going to say like Franca Potenta like must have like great cardio. Like if she's like she's not even like jogging, she's like running full tilt, like boom, 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 boom. Almost like that Tom Cruise run, like that's like super intense. Like
she actually looks like she's running, whereas a lot of people don't.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I had this a very similar, I guess, response to this, which is like, oh, I don't remember the opening being so weird. Like, again, I did some research too while we were watching, and apparently there's a lot of allusions to Vertigo in this movie. The most obvious, which apparently I did not pick up on, but when she goes to the casino in the third story, there's a painting in the back that is actually Kim Novak from Vertigo. That is what that painting is.
Where the woman's turned away from the thing.
Correct. So that's the back of Kim Novak's head from the film Vertigo.
And you know what? The way the camera panned, it made it seem like that was going to be an important piece.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't. Yeah,
I was like, nothing happened. She didn't turn around.
But they similarly in that movie, there's a lot of spirals that happen. So whether it's the staircase, which she runs down, or when he's in the phone booth, when Manny's in the phone booth, there's just a weird thing in the background that's spinning. And so there's a bunch of things that get brought in from that movie that he was inspired by. There's also another movie that I can't recall what it was called, but it came out in the 80s anyways, that it's not a direct adaptation from, but like borrows very heavily from. So definitely he was using a bunch of his own inspirations to create this. But like I said, I think it does feel like it's a step above a student film, but barely. And I mean that in the best kind of way. I don't mean that as like a negative necessarily, but there's some things that now as a, mid 30s, late 30s, I guess now, guy, it's just like, ooh, there's things that are like peeling around the edges I noticed, like those scenes with the mistress and how some of the colors are a little bit too oversaturated and that sort of thing, where it's like, ooh, interesting. Like if he had like another million, he could probably like iron some of this stuff out and like made this probably the way that he had visualized. But at the same time, I kind of like the grittiness of it. I like seeing this version of I don't know if they're in Berlin, but this version of Germany, at least, to be like, okay, so seeing what the 90s might have sort of felt like over in Germany, at least from a North American perspective. That's all I can see is from this movie. But there's a little bit more like the shocking red hair and the way that they're dressing and that sort of thing, which would have been, I don't know, pretty provocative, I would say, depending on what city or town I guess you grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the rave culture was like in Rocky Mountain House, but
it was zero.
When I met Helen, she had like short red hair.
Shut up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was wearing. We'll find pictures, but
Okay.
Yeah, I was just coming out of the rave scene, and she was having fun at them, straight and sort of like no drugs, but that's just who she is. Stay out all night and dance. It's interesting. You know, it's interesting. I'm just thinking, comparing it to the British films we've watched so much, and this idea of kind of the avant-garde neo-culture in Berlin and Germany, and how they're always depicted, I think, as, if not risk takers, at least not prudish. Whereas even like, what was that piece of crap we watched, Still Crazy? I mean, that's supposed to be this like edgy rock world,
right.
And it comes
doesn't
off like
feel like it at all.
Fucking retirement home movie, right? It's like everything from the tone, the palette, how they speak. There's nothing in it. And here we have a young German director, and it feels like it. There's a youth to it. There's an energy.
Well, not that I want to harp too much on this. It's just that there feels like there's a bit of a sexual liberation to this movie. And I think that is part of the Germanness of it. I mean, even growing up, like that was the prevailing things. Like you hear about like these German sex clubs and they're all like scandalous and stuff like that. Never been to one. I have no idea what they're actually like. So I'm really speaking out of turn here. But here it's like the idea of like femininity is really like Lola is not really feminine in the classic like Western standards, but is still, I don't know, for me, attractive and like engaging to watch, and I want to see her fulfill her like 20-minute run and dash, even if I'm not so fond of like the boyfriend that she has necessarily, because he seems to be wrapped up in some weird gangster stuff that's like, oh, you deserve better than this. But
well, that's my favorite counterculture part to America, is that they don't try to make Manny like a likable person. He's such a piece of shit, and you don't have to question why they're together, because it has nothing to do with the plot. The plot is, there's this strong-willed woman who's going to stop at nothing, including building, this butterfly effect thing where she's going to try different options to save his life. And the whole story gets to revolve around her in this moment. It's not even, I don't think, meant to be a sort of statement on women in culture, etc. It's just assumed almost. And I love too, like, yeah, she's sprinting. She's not trying to look debonair or like frail. She's like a beautiful woman who actually looks like a real human woman that you'll meet on the street. It was the most exciting thing for Bourne, the first one, was that she was the leading lady. And I was so excited because here you have Matt Damon and he meets like a real person and they go on this adventure, and it doesn't have to be someone, with a 20-inch waist and plastic boobs and probably 18. It's like,
And you don't have to vomit after watching the movie because the camera's shaking so much.
I was pre-Paul Greengrass, so we'll bag on that asshole later.
I mean, this is probably an unfair comparison, but it actually kind of reminds me of, I believe, the Bryce Dallas Howard character in Jurassic World, if you've actually seen that movie.
No.
Where in Heels, she outruns a T-Rex, and it's like, I don't understand how this is working. Whereas in this movie, no, like she's booking it, and I believe everything that's happening in the movie, even if all around it's ridiculous. I do want to touch on a little bit about those moments of photographs, because that's one of the cool things. And again, I bet you anything, if there had been more of a budget, he would have wanted to actually film those flights of fancy, but who knows? But the idea being like when she bumps into certain people on her journeys, then we get these little
fractals
of like Polaroids going on, so you can kind of see what happens later on in their life. And sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's like in the middle, like there's which just is an existence. Why do you think there was a focus on that?
Well, I mean, I think the whole movie revolves around. I hate that we're going to use butterfly effect, and all I'm thinking is Ashton Kutcher, but what I love about it is not even the positive, how uncompromising the ideas of what these people's lives could, should, will be like. even the first one's so jarring with the angry, shitty woman losing her baby and stealing another one. Like it's
stealing another baby.
You're just what the fuck just happened? And it snaps you out of the one fantasy into something that is still fantastical, but becomes almost too real. And I don't know what it'd be like as a German audience, whether that would have been shocking or just expected.
Old lady stealing babies. Yeah, we've seen that. Whatever.
I mean, not that, but I think one of the things that's more shocking for an American audience is that someone would have the bravado to just depict it, right? I mean,
Right.
the I can't remember which guy, the bicyclist guy dying of a heroin overdose or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's not something other than Requiem for a Dream that people are like so easily. They don't just throw that into a fun sort of a romantic thriller. They're so random. The hilarious BDSM moment with the bank tellers. Right. I mean, it's a great joke, but it's also something that's not going to be so openly depicted in an American, particularly in '99. That's some big stuff, and I loved it. I don't know when Memento came out, but I feel like
I think it was the next year after this.
Yeah, there's just this feeling too I have as a photographer about Polaroids. Like just visually, there's photography can be such a great narrative building device. I mean, you could make the argument film is interlinked that way with the different sense of time, but I love that.
I guess the one thing is like there's times where there's like a positive outcome, and then based on her next run through, it turns into a negative outcome. I think really what it's trying to delve into is like those half seconds, those fractions of time where we have to make choices really can have these ripples through other people's lives that we never ever know about. I don't know how much you prescribe to like the multiverse theory.
Well, there's more than one Spider-Man. We saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much you prescribe to the Spider-Verse theory, but no. But it's that kind of thing, right? Where they're like every choice you make splinters a world, and now there's these millions upon billions upon trillions of alternate worlds that are out there because of little mini choices that people did or did not make. And I actually love that idea of being able to harness that power to be like, hey, if I had made this choice, what would have happened? But then, of course, like everyone else would have had to make the same choice. And then you get into this weird paradox of that not really working properly. But in this one, it's like she runs on the stairs, and then the next time she goes down like 2 seconds slower. And the next one, she's like 2 seconds quicker, and how much of a difference that actually makes in the trajectory of her story.
Yeah.
And of other people's stories, too. I just think it's fascinating just to kind of look at that and talk about that outside of the film.
I think what makes this movie work for essentially a time travel movie is that it's self-aware enough that it shows her fate as well. Whereas most time travel movies have a protagonist that's got this God-given, ability to make things better.
I'm also here to make the world better. Just wait for my ultimate plan.
She and Manny die a lot, and people around them are constantly I mean, the top winning timeline has her shitty dad and his friend die. And that's the good one, right? So, I think uncompromising is a fascinating thing. I recently, on an insomniac night, was on Google and learned about white holes. Have you heard about white holes?
No, sounds racist, but I don't know.
White holes are the anus. No, so what it is the mathematical sort of counterpoint of black holes. So when the whole quantum black hole theory, and I don't understand any of it really. I mean, I read Brief History of Time. I have no recollection other than he had pictures in it. And so apparently, in order for some of the advanced math to work for a black hole, which is essentially, this tunnel into apparent nothingness, there are these white hole events that are sort of you can't see them because they're pure energy in the beginning of something. And one of the things that stuck with me at the end of trying to fall asleep, reading things I don't understand, is this concept that every time the energy from a white hole goes and ends in a black hole, the end of that black hole is essentially another white hole event. And so it's not a multiverse the way, like Spider-Man would be, where we're all kind of like The One, what a shitty movie, but Jet Li, who I used to love, but The One is ridiculous. He's like trying to kill all his other selves to gain the super like Highlander shit. So I don't think they mean in the parallel sense, but this concept that these things are cyclical are fascinating. And then the other stuff, determinism, fatalism, butterfly effect. I think I
think it even gets into questioning things of like free will versus like intelligent design, like someone who's like moving the chess pieces around. Like, yeah, this movie is very much in like, hey, we have the opportunity to change things if we want to.
Well, and you know what's interesting? I think there's a nuance. I don't know if this is intended, but I think one of the best parts of the storytelling is that she doesn't retain all of the experience from the first, but she keeps some of the pieces. So she's not aware, like in some, like that new Netflix show with Natasha, whatever her name is, from Orange is the New Black, and that movie's pretty good, and I think similarly inspired by Run Lola Run, and you know, yeah, more Run Lola Run than Rashomon. And so she keeps having to relive the same moment, Groundhog Day style, and she's aware of each death, and it's driving her crazy, but she keeps trying different things. I guess, is Palm Springs about that? Anyways, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But Run Lola Run, it's a similar sort of cyclical thing. She's not consciously reliving each moment, but she has retained little pieces. I think that's a fascinating tell that you can't just relive it, right? It's got to be all these different permutations. So I don't know if it's so much that you have this choice because she has to die or Manny's got to die each time. I think it's more, for me, a reflection that we just have to choose our best options and see what happens.
Well, I guess the other thing is there are some theorists out there that she is actually controlling the time jumps where she is actually physically able to turn back the clock just based on like her voiceover, and the screaming is able to somehow like control what's going on around her to a degree. So is there a bit of like, I don't know, paranormal superhero vibe to this thing that you pick up on, or is that just like wishful thinking?
No, I don't know. Definitely is something. I mean, the screaming thing is fucking weird. Yeah, there's something to be said about imagining scenarios, whether any of it actually happens at all. And she's just running through the possibilities of what'll happen if this happens. And, you know, if they were going to go that way, maybe at the end of the movie, she's still standing there on the call and just about to hang up the phone. And you have to figure out whether she decides to go one way or the other. Is it just supposed to take her out of reality so that the story can live on its own instead of us getting trapped in this discussion of whether we can change our own fates? Like, the only way she can change her fate is that she can scream at a roulette table and win 100,000 Deutschmarks.
Hey,
yeah.
If in 2 minutes I could walk in and walk out with $100,000, I mean, I would scream at the table too.
I'm just imagining you sitting there screaming and losing, and everybody's like, "What the fuck is wrong?
What the fuck are you doing?
Comes here every week.
Get out!"
This is like the 50th time you've been here, Kyle Marshall, and it's just not going to happen.
By the way, before we get too far, it's Russian Doll. Is the Netflix show with Natasha Lyonne.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing I picked up on, I don't know if you ever prescribe to color theory at all, but I'm a big fan of this, that sometimes directors, or usually a lot of times art directors and production designers, will put colors to mean certain things into the frame. And here's certainly the color red shows up a whole bunch of times, not just with her hair, but it's like, that's the color of the phone that she's talking on. That's the color of the room that they're laying in. That's the color of the bag that she's running with. I don't know if that means anything to you. Is it just red as a cool, vibrant color, or is there something else to that?
It's funny you should ask, because I was algorithmized by YouTube. So I just saw this thing about, I guess these linguistic researchers were doing color theory analysis, but across cultures. And what they found was there's a pattern in which human parlance, human language, develops terms for colors. And what's fascinating is that every culture starts with essentially white and black, or light and dark, and red. So the first color that typically gets a name of its own sort of nomenclature, if you will, is the color red. And whether that's because, you know, red, blood, death, I don't know what it is, there's a primal level where that becomes an important enough color. This became a bit of a vehicle for racists to suggest that so-called lesser cultures were colorblind, stupid, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But as the research developed, and the original researchers were trying not to be racist, as they delved more into the sociological stuff, they found that these tribes and newer generational cultures, it's not that they didn't have words to describe other colors, it's that they were associated with objects or other parts of their more, let's call it, simplified languages, because they didn't have a need yet to differentiate grass from the color green. The other thing that's interesting about that study is that they all typically develop along the same color spectrum, with blue being the last primary color that takes a name, and then there's a subsequent sort of, who can name colors anymore? You go to a paint store and nothing makes sense, right? Like, you invent shit. They're numbers, right? As you know, you're a computer guy.
I don't know if this is what you're going to eventually drive at, but that's like the push for the color pink in North America. Like, we're more able to see pink as a color, where a lot of other cultures, that's just a version of red. They don't need another word to call that a different color. I just think that's really interesting. As an English major, one of the biggest things, if you start to read early English lit, like old English lit, a lot of that is like Arthurian legends and that type of thing. They use this all the time. They basically substitute colors to just be feelings that you should be feeling. And, and one of the biggest ones is the color green. Green in our culture now is like, I don't know, it's green. I wear a green shirt. Like, we don't have any close ties to that. But back then, it always represented evil. So like the evil king would be wearing green, or the Green Knight in Arthurian legend was this evil entity that they had to go and vanquish. The dragon might be green. So it's interesting how those colors have changed over time, but can still be used to subvert different meanings and stuff like that.
Going back to the film, and with this sort of in my head, it's hard always, as we are learning in reflection, about deciding what the effect and what the intent was. So did the director have an intent to use red as, blood, warning, stop, or was it because of the budget, maybe an influence of an old movie that he saw, that he thought that having the sexy European cigarette smoking couple scene in bed had to be a red light thing? I don't know, right? I personally didn't get a thematic impact from the use of color. There are so many weird moments where he seems to be wanting to use different mediums, different expressions, but I don't think they work that well to establish a tone.
I do agree. I mean, not to ruin the movie that we may or may not be talking about, but The Sixth Sense does this, right? Where every time there's a red object, it is kind of in reference to, hey, he's a ghost.
You just fucking ruined it for me. I haven't watched that movie in like 20 years, Kyle, and now all I'm going to be doing is looking for colors. Thanks a lot.
Looking for colors. He does use it throughout that movie.
Damn it.
I just wanted to touch on a few things here. First off, hey, do you remember phone cards?
Yeah.
That you could use
in
like phone booths?
Yes.
I do too. It's like, boy, does that date this movie, because no one would have to.
Most of the cities, except for the very major cores, have gotten rid of payphones entirely. Calgary ripped them all out. I don't think there's any functioning payphones anymore. The one on Stephen Avenue, I have photographs of it at least installed, and I now have photographs. They've been literally physically torn out, never mind being functional. Mm-hmm. But phone cards are important. If you had to make an out-of-city call, you needed a phone call. You can't carry that many quarters.
Back then when I went traveling, because I went down to the United States for a few months in my first and second year of university. It was a 2-month stint at the summer camp, and they had a payphone. That was the only phone that they had. They had like these banks of like 4 or 5 payphones. And so my mom and dad would load up a phone card, and when I went down there, I just insert it, call them up, and they were like, yes, like blah, blah, blah. They'd connect us and everything would
collect
work fine.
Calls. Nobody does that anymore. And you did a cheat where they would ask you what your name is, and you just quickly spit out a message. And then, have you ever done that? And it's like, I'm here, and they're like, will you receive a call from, and then they give the message.
I'm here, and come bring up.
You just hang up. Nobody pays any money. Moral gray areas.
My other note I wrote down, though, like that's on that same topic, is that this whole premise of the movie would never have happened had they had cell phones.
Of course.
Because they could just text each other. It's like, I'm here, I'm almost there. Like, just wait. And
although with the character of Manny, who knows? That guy is such a head case. I mean, there's nothing, there's no decision that he made that came down to sanity. That dude was neurotic.
He's bad news. I hope she learns that and moves on in this fictional world. Take that $100,000 for yourself and you move on.
What did you think of the giving the guy the gun scene?
I mean, I don't buy it, but first of all, not really, at least.
Yeah, it's weird in today's context where we have so much cynicism that you immediately think this homeless guy's going to shoot him, take both.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, he's going to shoot him. I'm sure that's what I thought the very first time I watched the movie, but yeah, I just don't know if I just go be handing my guns off to anyone, especially when he knows you have $100,000. It's like, okay, now give it back to me, idiot.
Yeah. Like at least unload it. Maybe it had no bullets in the first place. Who knows? It is Manny. He's not a smart man.
So this movie starts off with two little inscriptions. And I think it's the one by T.S. Eliot, although I don't remember anymore. But I loved it because it was like, after the game is before the game. And I just wanted to quickly talk about how that is talking about this movie, or how you think it works into this movie, because I've been trying to figure this out, which is, at least the way that I interpret that, is that if you are like, I'm using game as a sports metaphor, so maybe it's not, but as a sports metaphor, I like that idea of like, after the game ends, you were just playing the game, but now the preparation for the next one starts. So you have to start preparing yourself for that next battle, the next challenge. Having just also watched the Netflix series, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, it's like, that was him to a T. It's like, okay, we gonna finish this game. It's now preparing for the next game. There was no off for him during like playing basketball. I guess my question is, how does that relate to this movie?
So on another YouTube hole I was in.
Jeez, all you're doing is watching YouTube. For someone who hates YouTube, you certainly spend a lot of time on it.
I don't hate it anymore. It's a primary app now in my life. I watched a TED Talk with Simon Sinek, and he's apparently quite a controversial guy. He's one, the problem with mansplaining is you pick a side and you have to kind of just say that you know everything. But I was watching this thing about, I think the overall thing was, how and why the American culture collapsed, etc. I mean, go figure. That's the one I would pick, right, Kyle?
Right. That seems not up your alley at all.
To this point, he's talking about this subject through this idea of game theory, which I've heard the term, but I don't care usually.
I read a book on game theory a long time ago.
I don't even know what it really means. But he brought the distinction, which I thought was fascinating, the difference between finite and infinite games. Finite and infinite. Finite and infinite?
Finite and infinite, yes.
Why do you pronounce them differently, Kyle? You're an English major. Give me the etymology.
Why do you pronounce wind and wind differently? You just do.
They mean different words, but infinite and finite are related because they're inversions. No, okay. So to this comment, it's interesting. His definition of the finite game is there's a set number of unknown players, there's a set number of known rules, there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a victor, a loser, etc. And so, bring up Michael Jordan. When he talks about the context of him as a basketball player, and if you read some of stories about his personality around basketball, he's insane. So when it comes to basketball, it's a succession of finite games. What drives him to win all of them is obviously a very complex thing. But I suspect that this quote, without being directly related to this distinction from this one TED Talk I watched, might refer more to this infinite game idea where there's unknown players, unknown thing. And he says the point of those conceptual infinite games is not to win or lose, but to be self-sustaining. So the game continues to play out. And the only idea of winning and losing is if one or several of the sides give up of their own accord. They run out of steam, interest, money. So I don't know. In that context, I think the quote has relevance. In the first context of a finite game, it doesn't make any sense at all because this movie, I mean, it's reliving and replaying the same moment over and over again. It goes too abstract, I think, to be encapsulated by a two one line, 2-point quote. I think the T.S. Eliot was the first one, the longer quote, and this one I'm pretty sure it looked like a German name, but I didn't recognize it.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll never know the true answer to that, but I'm pretty sure we got pretty close.
Do you think the security guard is her dad?
Oh, that's a good, maybe. Because he does seem to be very like fatherly towards her.
And there's that moment where she saves his life by choosing to stay with him for an extra 10 seconds to calm his heart down. I mean, it's not acknowledged, but his character is fascinating because he's, I think, the only character.
Wait, sorry. The guy in the ambulance is the security guard?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I think. It's not the father, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's the security guard because he keeps having heart attacks. In every scene he's in, he's about to or has a heart attack from shock.
Right.
At least, okay, so maybe I should put it not in such a definitive way. I think it was the security guard in the ambulance. And he keeps playing the central because he seems like the only character that shows her any warmth, compassion, or interest in her life. And everything around her is poisonous. It's fascinating to me that there's I think there's an undercurrent there as well.
I like that. I mean, there's an interesting interpretation. I do like that. This movie actually put me down a Wikipedia hole because I didn't understand what he meant when he called her a cuckoo's egg. I'm like, I don't know what that means. So for those of you who don't know, apparently the cuckoo lays the eggs in a different bird's nest and then has that bird raise the young.
Yeah. And the cuckoos are huge.
Same type of thing.
Yeah. It's weird because they're always larger than the host bird, because cuckoos are not small birds. And this is the thing, even when she's leaving in that first scene, and it keeps being part of, I mean, the two things that were really interesting in terms of reliving the same moment but giving different tones is the first romantic interchange where we are revealed that the biological mother's an alcoholic. So the first time she runs through, you don't see anything. You just see this woman who's like, get me some extra groceries or whatever it was. And then the second time they run through it, you realize like she's sitting there drinking. On the table is a bottle of whatever, whiskey or something. And then you can't leave it.
Unsee it.
And then the second interchange with them. And then with the cuckoo's egg, which I think is why my brain started trying to guess who the father is, if it's even supposed to be there. And then I love the second take where the mistress is like, it's not your, I mean, you know, the irony, right? Some fascinating little twists to keep you engaged in these people.
See, this is why I like Tom Tykwer. He does some interesting things with time and all that kind of stuff.
We're done here.
Well, the machine has told us that we have to wrap this up. So, Dave, the time has come to rate this movie out of 5. If people do want to see our whole list of movies that we have been talking about, currently at 34, you can go over to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. KDVSTM is also where you can follow us on Instagram or on Twitter. I would love it if people have their own opinions. You can actually reach us at Kyle and Dave versus the Machine, Kyle and Dave vs the Machine at gmail.com. And as we've been mentioning at the beginning, we do have our Patreon that's available there as well. All this is, of course, in the show notes.
Just tell us we're wrong. I dare you. Come at us, bro.
I dare you to tell us we're wrong. Dave, what would you give Run Lola Run out of 5?
I'm hovering between a 3.5 and a 4. I think there's a lot of meat in it, but it is so dated. I mean, we didn't really ask the question whether it would hold up. And I
guess we did. Let's do that. Do you think this holds up, and do you still think it's culturally relevant?
I hate to say no, but it's hard to watch. If I was thinking of myself, let's say Emerson's 19, whatever age you have to be to watch this, does this movie make any sense to him? And I'm not sure it does. From the animation to the sort of pacing to the technological things, narratively, it's really cool. And there's a lot of good philosophical bones in it. But I don't think this movie exists. I mean, hardly existed in 1999. When we look at those box office numbers, they called it, a reasonable return. But was it like $6 million or $9 million?
$7 million it made.
Yeah, it hardly existed in 99. So I don't know. I think for that reason, as much as I did love it and I was still interested in it, I feel like I might have to go with like a 3.5. It sucks. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, call us. Tell us we're wrong.
Well, I mean, this is where I'm going to come down on it. I mean, I have, I agree with you somewhat in that I think that it is dated now. Like, I think that the bones that you mentioned, the philosophical bones, are a little bit stronger, even if the filmmaking you can tell is like, this is early digital filmmaking. There's some shortcuts that had to be made, but I don't know. I still found myself, the thing I'll say is that I can tell that the movie is working, at least for me, if I don't have an urge to look at my phone. And I very rarely had an urge to look at my phone. I know that's a weird frame of reference, but it's like I was totally in this for the entire time.
Let me just counterpoint that just quickly.
Yeah.
Had I theoretically watched this with Helen, I was enraptured in it. She didn't even watch the movie. She didn't give a shit at all. And this is a movie that we've watched together years ago. And yeah, she was not. So we are nerds, Kyle. I'm just going to put that out there.
I guess that is true. Anyways, I am going to give it a 4. I don't think it reaches the level of like best movies of all time list or anything like that, but I think it's solid. I think it's a solid film. That being said, it averages to 3.75, though we'll have to put that down to a 3.5 because we don't round up. This means that it is tied with the movie Payback. So do you think this is a better or worse movie than the film Payback?
This is tough. It's more intelligent.
It's not tough for me, but
it's more intelligent, but Payback is a lot more fun to watch. So, yeah, I'm a little stuck on this one.
I'm going to say it's better than Payback, personally. I just think that there's more to it. Whereas Payback, I think, is, that solid thriller. I just think that this has more to it. Although, interestingly, what's funny, looking at these ratings, it's completely reversed. I gave a 4 to Run Lola Run, and you gave it a 3.5. Payback, I gave it a 3.5, and you gave it a 4. So,
so of course, we're going to be stuck
we're
on this
a little bit loggerheads.
Well, let's have a short debate about this. Are we going to rank this on lasting thematic value or watchability? So, are you going to be more likely in a moment to turn on a Mel Gibson film noir, empty entertainment,
Well, yeah.
or are you going to watch Run Lola?
This is where I guess I mean, to answer your question, I'm probably more likely to watch Run Lola Run in the future again. Going into the cultural relevance, and there's maybe many different outside reasons why this is the case, but Payback is not available on any streaming service, and I don't think had a Blu-ray release. Whereas Run Lola Run did have a Blu-ray release and is at least available on certain streaming platforms.
Well,
so there seems to be a desire to watch this film.
Well, we can't make that
Payback.
argument because there's so many movies that should be streaming and just don't exist. They're in a black hole, not a white hole, but a black hole somewhere, Kyle.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot more political nuance to
Well, maybe The
distribution.
Last Picture Show should be a better movie, Dave. I don't know.
Oh, damn. No, you know what, though? I'll put Run Lola Run above because of its intelligence and its thematic. I think my caveat is that I probably would end up pressing play on Payback more often than I would on Run Lola Run again. I'm not sure if I would watch Run Lola Run again.
Well, that makes you a monster.
Well, I sold the DVD for a reason.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, entering our list then at the number 12 position is Run Lola Run. Dave, I guess we should find out what we're watching next week.
I'm ready.
Let me push this little button here. Oh, we get a little bit of a spy action. We're going to be watching The World Is Not Enough. A 007, a James Bond movie.
A spy or a ham? I guess we'll find out.
I guess a spider ham, you might say.
All right. Well, listen, Kyle, why don't you put down that bag and I'll give you this gun and we'll just both walk out of here.
At the same time.
At the
Do it at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Neither of us move.